Good morning. This is October the 25th, Friday 2024. And we are in BBIS first semester compulsory English class, where we have been reading the essay Rhymes with Fondue Free for the last 3 days. And I might have borrowed someone's pen. I guess it's not my pen. Is it someone's here? It's not my pen. Okay. So, in my previous class, I was in section 2 of the essay, where I was reading paragraph 1. And I talked about concepts like flashback technique in writing. And I said that in this essay, there is an interplay between present and past. The present moment triggers a memory in her mind, and she goes back to past. So in section 1, opening paragraph, you saw that the receptionist could not pronounce her name correctly. So this issue, the experience of someone living in another culture and facing various difficulties, that's with what they say begins. And in section 2, if you see, she moves to her past, 1970s. Maybe she's moving to 40, 50 years back. In section 1, when she is in Canada, I'm not sure, but I guess she is in her 50s. Maybe, I'm not sure. But in section 2, that interaction with the receptionist, the scene, opening scene, takes her back almost 50 years before, 40 years before. And she remembers the 1970s, and not only that, she begins by talking about this thing. I was 3 years old. She begins, do not yawn. Do not yawn. Early morning. I've just started my class and you are feeling sleepy. You are not here to sleep in my class, please. My classroom is not a restroom or drawing room or living room where you can just rest and sleep. You must come fresh in my class. Physically, mentally, okay? If I yawn, you can put me out of class. But when you yawn, it's so contagious. I might yawn now. Because yawning is psychologically highly contagious. You talk to somebody on video call, seven seas across. If they yawn from Australia, you will yawn here. If you don't believe, you try it. Yawning is highly, highly contagious. If you yawn, it makes other people yawn. Make sure you come to my class fresh. Okay. So, then she talks about other characters. Like, for example, she says that she had Dara, who was older than her. And Dara, she describes Dara's appearance. And I told you, note down Dara under character. And I said, write the description under character. Because when you read a story and when you meet a character, note character's name, and under that, write the details about the character you find in the story. For example, her physical appearance. She has oblong face, she has blue eyes, she has blonde hair, right? Okay, now, what did Dara do? She made us children feel at home. Dara and the other kids. Now we know there were other kids under the section character in your note copy. write down other kids. Now you know that there were other kids. Me by my family nickname, Sanu, little one. Now this is, and write Sanu and then write Nepali word. This is called trans language, code switching using another language. Okay, now we move ahead. I also remember that yesterday I also introduced you to the new term kairos. And I said, when she says 1970s, then I told my story, how I was 3 years old in 1972. And I saw the crash of Skylab, right? So what is kairos? Political, cultural, historical circumstances amid which the rhetor makes his or her speech. For example, if you were describing kairos of my class, you could talk about Rabi Lamichhane case, because this is political situation. If you describe the kairos of this classroom, 20 years later on in a piece of writing, you will say, when Divakar sir was teaching BBIS in 2024 October month in Nepal, this political scene was going on. That's kairos. Kairos is what is political situation, what is cultural situation, what is social situation, etc. Okay. Then I also talked about implied rhetor, right? I said there are two types of rhetor, real rhetor and implied rhetor. Right now, I won't explain implied rhetor to you. I'll explain later on. But I told you what is real rhetor. If you feel that the person telling you the story is exactly the same person who wrote the story, then that is called a real rhetor. Okay. Now, if you talk about implied rhetor, I have note here, I should tell right now. Implied rhetor is a figure that writers create in the story. For example, do you see when Manjushree Thapa wrote this essay around 2010? I guess she was in her 50s, right? But in the essay, she says, I was 3 years old. So this I in the story is 3 years old. So this I, who is just 3 years old, is implied. And what is she? She is a daughter. This implied rhetor is a daughter. Now, how do you know the implied rhetor? To understand implied rhetor, ask a question. What role is the narrator playing in the story? The role that the narrator plays in the story, that makes the implied rhetor. For example, in this story, the narrator is a daughter. She is a student. She is a friend. Okay, now move ahead to new paragraph from today. I'll quickly read and explain. I'm showing you, in this class, I'm showing you how we read. I'm demonstrating effective reading, close reading. Okay. I spend the days watching Romper Room, a children's program, picking up language. Peanut butter were my first English words. And when I was not bothering my nanny, a wizened Nepali widow, I played with a deathly pale French-Canadian 3-year-old Kathy. Now, besides Dara, note under character, you have a new character now, Kathy. Note under character, the wizened Nepali widow, nanny. Under character, please note down, we meet another character, nanny. Now, in this paragraph, there is another remarkable thing. What is she telling? She says that when she was 3 years old, she watched the television series Romper Room. What is that? American children's television series 1953 to 1994 for preschoolers. Children 5 years of age or younger, included games, exercises, songs, storytelling, and moral lessons, regularly accompanied by a background music. Etiquette was a focus. When I was 3 years old, like her, we did not have television in 1970s. The first time I saw a black and white television was 1983 or 2. So now ask me, Divakar sir, how did you learn to read and write? So my parents would sit on the bed, They would make me sit on the ground and they'll give me the book Mahabharata, a very big book. And they will open a story in Sanskrit and Hindi. And they will say, okay, try to pronounce the Sanskrit slokas. I'll pronounce Sanskrit slokas. My father would guide me how to pronounce Sanskrit. Then I'll read the Hindi story to my parents. Each evening, every evening, I would read one story to my parents. I did this for 4, 5, 6 years. And I finished the whole volumes reading this story to my parents. And now I know the story. That's how now this is called, why I'm telling this? This is called, this paragraph is example of literacy narrative. Note down. What is literacy narrative? A story where a writer tells how they learn to read, write, listen, speak. What is literacy narrative? Literacy narrative means a story in which writers tell how they came to read and write, how they learn to read and write. Got my point? I didn't tell this thing previously. Now I'm showing you. Now move ahead. Kathy. We did not have a language in common because Kathy spoke French. Please understand that in Canada, the second most spoken language is French. Particularly in Quebec state, French is the first language, right? Canadian 3-year-old Kathy, we did not have a language in common or much language at all. Our friendship took place in a solemn pantomime. Note this word. You want a Coke? Yes, look, my parents have a fridge full of it. What is pantomime? Conveying a story through expressive bodily or facial movement. If you watch Charlie Chaplin on YouTube, where you have no sound, that is pantomime. Have you seen Charlie Chaplin series on YouTube? Just watch this afternoon. Because in Charlie Chaplin series, there is no sound. He makes meaning by gesture. So pantomime is making your meaning through body language, through gesture. Why? Because she spoke maybe Nepali and Kathy spoke French. Look, we have a universal language, right? Move ahead. So this paragraph is remarkable for what? Literacy narrative. This paragraph 2 in section 2 is an example of what? Literacy narrative. Move ahead. Okay. By the time we returned to Nepal 2 years later, so she says I was 3, 2 years means 5, she was 5. She came to Nepal when she was 5. I was fluent in English. I have my niece in Australia, we talk over a video call. She is 2.5 now. And she speaks fluent English. I can't speak with her. She speaks like a native child. And I'm many times not able to catch her up, what he's saying. Then I say, repeat it. I don't know, what did he say? She speaks slowly again. Then I catch. We learn English by the time we are 3 or 4 years old, right? Okay. Look, she's 5 and look what she writes. She's just 5 and look what she says. I was fluent in English, fluent enough to flirt with Tom, a 9-year-old, my first crush. So what do you see here? Another remarkable thing. In many places in this narrative, the rhetor will share her growth. The writer is sharing her growing experience. And among our growing experiences, we have sexual experiences as a children. But in our culture, our parents tell that talking about sex is dirty. So we avoid talking about that. We hide them, we suppress them. But I'm pretty sure everybody in this class, don't feel offended, you have had sexual experiences as early as 3, 4, 5 years old. I had. I told you, I used to play with a girl of my age and I had a kind of attraction. I was sexually assaulted by gay young boys when I was just 5, 6 years old. I was assaulted. I have had, why are you laughing? You are laughing because you are insulting me by your laugh. You are insulting your teacher by laughing at the teacher. Your teacher is honestly telling these things to make you understand. And you fool, you laugh at the teacher because you are demeaning the teacher. You have no manner. So I said, I was assaulted when I was barely 5 or 6. But I never wrote about this memory. If I now write my memoir, I might talk about this thing. So I was making a point. In this narrative, there are many instances of sexual misconduct, sexual assault that the writer has undergone. Below at one point, the writer uses the word neurosis, neurotic. And I had a suspicion that this issue of neurosis comes because, as she hints here, right? She might have been sexually assaulted many times. It's my guess. I'm not sure. We will have to interview the author. Move ahead. So at 5, she had her crush. At 3, I had my crush. Her name was Rekha. And his name is, what's his name? Tom. Look, it's interesting to see that as early as 3, 4 years age, we have this feeling of love for someone. Move ahead. But my main memories of that period revolve around the benign muteness of a foreign child. Mark this. She is 5 years old. She is in another culture, Canada. So what does she do? She keeps mute. This is very remarkable because this essay is about the experience of growing in an unfamiliar culture, in a foreign culture. And one effect you see here, she says, I would always keep mum. Right? Foreign child, see, in an open-hearted land, being led around by Dara, the neighboring girl, drinking coke with Kathy. See, when you read this line, drinking coke, remark here, cultural influence. If she had grown up in Tanahu, her parental land, she would grow drinking doodh dahi moi, most probably yogurt. Because she grew in Canada, she grew up drinking coke. Many of you might have grown up drinking coke because you live in Kathmandu city. This is cultural influence. And when I finally got to school, going up to the teacher, it's more interesting now. Look here. She's 5, maybe 6 now. Going up to the teacher. Now she describes. Keep in mind, every time she introduces a character, she writes 2 or 3 sentences describing the character. So under the heading character, note a new character now. We have Kathy, we have Dara, we have kids, we have the wizened widow, the nanny. We have nanny. We met nanny, receptionist, rater, nanny, Kathy, Dara, and now we have the teacher. How does she look? A plump, pretty white lady dressed in pink and nudging the back of her. Nudging is, you touch with your body parts knowingly, unknowingly, you happen to prod. The back of her chubby, shiny pantyhose. Note down, this is remarkable because this is a visual image. This is a very strong visual image. What is pantyhose? We know. Women have a long, I don't know the exact word because I don't belong to this culture. They have this leggings type thing. It comes up to here, right? It's women's thin nylon tights, encased thighs. she remembers what she did when she was 6 years old, when she is 50. Till she turned and saw me looking up, lost. Because the teacher could not understand why a 6-year-old student would prod her thighs. And found, I remember the powdery scent of her perfume as she knelt down to communicate with me. See, again and again, she uses the word remember, remember, remember. And I told you, this is an example of memoir, right? So, I remember the powdery scent of her perfume as she knelt down to communicate with me. Section over. Now, let's wrap up before we move to the next section. So, in this section, which we started yesterday, how many paragraphs are there? 1, 2, 3. There are 3 paragraphs in this section 2, and section 2 takes place in Canada in 1970s, and section 2 tells a lot of things about her childhood. She introduces Kathy, she introduces Dara, she introduces her nanny, she introduces her teacher, she also tells about her first crush Tom. And she also shares 2 interesting details, how she happened to prod the teacher's thighs and how she still remembers the scent used by the teacher. Now, this thigh is a visual image, but the scent is, I'm not sure about the word, either olfactory or gustatory. Please check your dictionary before you can note down. An image that appeals to your smell, that is called either gustatory or olfactory. Gustatory, gustatory, olfactory, olfactory. Among these 2 words, one is about taste, one is about smell, but I'm not sure which one is what. You clarify. Okay, so let's wrap up. Any questions about this section you have? Take your pen. Take your pen. I'll give you 5-minute time. In 5 minutes, you will write as fast as possible. You won't stop before 5 minutes. If no idea comes, you keep squiggling. For 5 minutes, you will continuously write whatever I taught you in the last 20 minutes. Your time starts now.